on research and development are invested in the businesses themselves. I'm just coming from Vietnam and had a very detailed discussion with the head of the nanotechnology division of BASF, one of the largest chemical companies worldwide. The R&D department of BASF consists of more than 17,000 people. It's an R&D driven industry. Just for very specific detailed support, they need organizations like Fraunhofer or like Harvard or like London School of Economics, MIT, or others which are existing, because most of their innovation activities they can do by themselves. And in terms of expenditure, among the German expenditure on R&D, 2/3 are spent by industry. Only 1/3 is spent by the government. If you look in this part of the world, and if you look in most of the Islamic countries or Arabic countries, the governmental expenditure on R&D are less than 0.1% compared to national GDP. There are two countries who are investing a bit more. One is Turkey, which, and well, it's not an Arabic country, but it's let's say nearby. Turkey catched up a lot in the last years, but mostly because of investing in strategic industries. Most of their televisions, TV sets, and also electric products are coming from Turkey. Because they were able, by doing a lot of benchmarking as well, to learn from Western countries to, let's say, manufacture at the moment products of the level of the mid of the 90s, which is perfect to achieve the first step of industrialization. And I'm very sure that in at latest 10, 15 years, Turkey is also on a level of developing as well as manufacturing high-tech products. Yes, that was my final statement.
Okay. Did you want to say anything about the stakeholder situation? You mentioned stakeholders in your presentation.
The thing you should take into consideration of any corporation is that every activity has an impact on a different stakeholder. And what companies should look is that they should list and identify all their stakeholders and try to see how they can remove the negative impact of their activities on different stakeholders. But the thing is that some stakeholders have conflicting interests. So the point is that they have to find a trade-off between these interests that will mostly benefit the company, but will also try to satisfy all the stakeholders.
Do we have the microphone in operation? There's a hand up over there. Thank you.
As for all the presentation, I think most of them were very beneficial for all of us. I just wanted to add on the matter of the innovation. I think it's very important, maybe the colleague can add on this matter, is that you distinguish yourself in this competitive market. There's no more saying that I live in my city and this is the area where I need to compete. You're competing globally right now. Unless you become with something innovative, something we call blue ocean strategy, something different than the other, nobody's going to buy your thing. I think Apple is a very good example of this matter. How many of us uses iPhone, iPod, iPad, all these things? They came with something different, something I call a blue ocean strategy, something that distinguished them from the others. Unless as a city we don't do something like this one. I think that's what maybe it's when you show the indexes of ease of doing business. That's what we are trying to do, for example, in Dubai, is that to make it more attractive for people to come, distinguish ourselves in the market. Unless you do that thing, I think it's very difficult to compete in the global market. Don't you agree with me?
I will answer quite briefly. Innovation, as you correctly said, is also not only about having a good product and good structures. It's a very important fact is also to have a good branding. If you look at Harley Davidson stopped a couple of years ago engineering engines. The Harley Davidson engine is developed by Porsche. Harley Davidson is making most turnover with clothes. They're not, at the moment, they're not selling motorbike that much anymore. They're selling adventure. And this is a problem for many countries as well. Or many countries will be faced by this, like China. China is capable to produce already good products, but the branding is not good. I bet if a Chinese car will have a similar quality as a Porsche, you will not buy a Chinese car. Hopefully you will rely on Porsche in the future as well. But therefore it is much more than just to have something good for a cheap price. It is much more behind to have a complete innovation development. And this is a chance for this region as well. A chance to focus on one or two specific technologies to create over the next years a very clear branding on a high quality, and then this could become world class and a success story of the overall region.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talking about innovation in that context, because I think you just nearly said unique selling point, which is quite good. And I'd like to think of innovation certainly encompassing research and development, but also using the term do something different, think outside the box, and maybe bring innovation back to doing things differently, because it's doing things differently that will give you that unique selling point. So I think it encompasses both R&D and actually doing things differently, which I think we find in terms of a message and experience that Holger mentioned. And certainly motorbikes, I know in other areas in this region, do generate quite a lot of enthusiasm in terms of an experience. Okay, have we got anyone else there who wants to pick the microphone up and ask a question? Can you say who you are and where you're from? Thank you.
Hamid Rajlan, Gulfi Consultants. It's a question which I had raised before with Dr. Rubin, and I would like to repeat it for the benefit of attendants. We are all aware that benchmarking consists of formal benchmarking and informal benchmarking. Informal could be easy, you can compare balance sheets, turnover, you can read newspapers, financial reports, and you can benefit from the results of other companies. But when it comes to formal benchmarking, I think there are always obstacles. I believe that even in Europe or the United States, there are best practices which are supposed to be confidential, or these best practices are behind competitiveness and success. And I think in this area, it's even less transparent, and it's more confidential. So I would expect there will be benchmarking, let's say, between KOC and KNBC and PIC, because all of them belong to KBC. And even there could be a benchmarking between PIC and Dow Chemicals because of their relation. But to see a benchmarking between a bank and another bank in Kuwait, I would see it impossible. So I'm sure probably some of the speakers will discuss these obstacles to benchmarking. I wonder what's your views about this point. Thanks.
Certainly in terms of people wishing to exchange ideas and the confidentiality aspect, I used to run a visiting program many years ago when I was a government official, and we had 7,000 people visiting 160 host companies a year to look at best practice. And basically we did have banks visiting banks, and some of those banks are actually out here. They're not necessarily winning the Dubai Customer Service Award for banks, because I see the Iraq Bank is actually at the top of that list. But they are out here, and they do talk to each other. Because, first of all, some companies will be confident enough to think they're that far ahead, that when you tell you what they did that, and they're now doing something else that they're not telling you about. Also, if you're going into an organisation, they're looking to see what they can get out of you as well. And when you get there, you might actually ask some questions that they hadn't thought of, or the people might actually be quite enthused. They've got to get things ready to show, and they'll review, and there are all sorts of other things that come the other way. Now, that's fine. I do tune into what you're saying, and I think that hangs around culture, and the culture of the organisations and the area. And there is a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of leadership and culture to actually prepare the ground for the tools that then come in later. So that would be my answer, but I'll throw that open to the panel.
I would like to answer this question with a practical example. A project we delivered also for Mercedes-Benz about 12 years ago. And Mercedes-Benz, in specifically one plant, they lost thousands, millions of Deutsche Marks because of not paying invoices within 2 to 3 weeks. There is a rule in Germany that if you pay your invoices within 2 or 3 weeks, you can get a discount of 3%. It's the best investment you can do, to take these 3% by paying quick. And then we did a benchmarking project for them and asked ourselves who is very good in paying invoices very fast. And for sure, this was not Volkswagen, neither it was BMW. Therefore, it is not that a bank needs to look at another bank. Here we went to Siemens. And Siemens had a very sophisticated approach. They said, during the invoice checking process, if the value of the invoice differs by plus minus 60 Deutsche Marks from what was delivered, we just pass it through, because the invoice checking process is more costly than 60 euros. That means if there were, if they found mistakes between the delivery and the invoice, they passed it through. Finally, they saved millions of Deutsche Marks by introducing a new approach of invoice checking. So therefore, it is not that a bank visits a bank to talk about what both are doing. It is about, at first, and this was also presented this morning, to setting the terms of references and to set the objectives. What is the problem after a diagnosis? And if maybe the problem of a bank is customer service, there is no need to go to another bank. There is a need to go to another organization which is perfectly in customer service and has very good customer satisfaction indexes. We totally agree, and I think all GBM members who are here totally agree, that a bank would not open the door to other banks. Volkswagen would never open the doors to Toyota, neither would do Porsche and BMW. But they can learn very good for solving specific problems by looking in other industries. And this works in most of the countries worldwide very successfully. Therefore, this is a recommendation I guess all GBN members could give to you as an industry professional.
I'll answer the question from a very regional and maybe specifically GCC perspective, right? When I speak in Arabic, that's easier to understand the perspective, right? So, أظن سؤالك الجواب فيه مركز على محورين. المحور الأول اللي هو الثقافة. ثقافتنا احنا، هل نقدر احنا في منطقتنا نتقبل ان نعطي ثقافة التميز هالكلتشر او هاي المبادرات اللي موجودة عندنا؟ وطبعا الثقافة تاخذ وقت. لا نتصور احنا من اول مرة ان نحن نطلب مقارنات معيارية ان احنا راح نقدر نحصلها. يتطلب وقت، فهم من القيادة الى اهمية المقارنات المعيارية. اتكلم يمكن الجواب الثاني هو وجود الادوات والتكنولوجيا. يمكن دكتور روبن عنده اداة جدا مهمة اللي هي التريد. يعني يمكن ما I'm not doing marketing for trade دكتور روبن, but what trade does اللي يسوونه تريد بالضبط ان ياخذون الممارسات اللي موجودة في المؤسسات المختلفة ويعرضونها على ويب سايت وتقدر تدخله وتشوف شو الممارسات الموجودة. في نفس الوقت احنا في مجموعة دبي الجوزة فهمنا هذا التحدي. هذا التحدي موجود عندكم، موجود عندنا في المنطقة. فقمنا ببعض المبادرات، ان هاي المبادرات تقدر تساعد مجتمعنا احنا في الامارات او مجتمع الخليج، طبعا كان عندنا اخوه من البحرين بعد شاركوا ويانا في هاي التحديات المقررة.